How do I need to look at data? Am I going to be output big picture?
Yeah.
Or I need the details? He's able to give them that granular detail, or he was able to stay up high.
Yeah.
So the tool really does enlighten people and help them feel more comfortable. That was one of the things he said is it helped him to feel more prepared, more comfortable. And that's why he had very strong results. And he's still there again today with very
Still
strong
top
results.
performer.
Welcome to the 4 Bars Podcast. I'm Ken Leith.
And I'm Patty Leith. We are your hosts for some compelling dialogue, encouraging our listeners to strengthen their connections
And build strong communities, lifting each other up and connecting in ways that matter.
We named the podcast 4 Bars as a reference to how hard we work to find a 4 Bars connection on our devices.
And we wondered what could happen with relationships if we worked as hard at connecting.
Let's find out. Hi, welcome back to 4 Bars Podcast. I'm Patty Leith, co-host, and I have with me...
Yes, I'm your co-host, Ken Leith.
Yeah.
Pleasure to be back.
We've gotten some feedback that there was an interest in and a desire to hear more about our connectivity tool. A few weeks back, we put out an episode where we talked about the importance of understanding the level of detail of the individual that you are speaking with and really connecting your message to reach their detail level needs. You may remember we called it Changing Leaf and Evergreen. There are two other components to this tool that help people connect. And so we're going to talk about the second component to this tool. We call this preference tree and forest because there are people who have a preference to process their thinking externally. And we call them forests. They have a preference to be around others. And then there are folks who prefer to do their thinking internally before speaking out loud. And we call them trees. That preference is for that analysis to take place in their heads. And this really does impact how we communicate. So we thought we'd dig a little bit deeper into that. And we'll do another episode where we get into just the basic concepts of influence. But Ken, can you share a little bit about this particular dimension of our connectivity, why it's important?
Yeah, and just for our visitors we have here today, these are part of a tool that Patty created with a client. It was the first iteration of it back in 2001.
No, excuse me, 4.
Yep,
yeah,
2004. So it's been quite a while.
Yeah.
Been through a lot of iterations. And the tool is called Interface Methods. And so it really, as Patty said, it is a behavioral instrument. So beauty of that means it's not in our wiring, the way we're wired in our DNA. So we can learn quickly about it and we can adapt. And in this particular area, when we talk about the fact that someone's an internal processor versus an external processor, some of those characteristics are that the internal processor may not be comfortable if they are asked to come in and brainstorm, unless they've been given an agenda up front, or if they're a subject matter expert to that. So they just have to have a little time. And sometimes they get judged if they don't have an agenda and they're thinking it through because they're not quite ready during a meeting. And we've actually heard people share things like, well, they were using up oxygen in the room.
Yeah.
And they
don't care about what we're trying to do.
They're not engaged. But
none of which is true.
Absolutely. They just need to have it where they are comfortable with that. And conversely, you have the person, as you identified, who is the forest. And that person is very comfortable at having dialogue on the fly. I like to think of them when I share with people and I'm talking about these, is that internal processor, they are just consuming it internally, but then they're ready to share. And that external processor, they're the people you see walking around the office or wherever it may be. They're collecting pieces of a puzzle that they're working on, whether it's solving a problem, taking their strategy higher, whatever it may be. And each of those pieces are key to them to come up and develop their idea and take it from an idea. And if you think about it, an analogy, it's going from 0 to 60 or from concept to reality. And they're able to do that. And then when we get to the end of that, 2 different methodologies, how do they come together? How does that look? And what are some of the bumps people have to worry about and maybe make sure that they don't fall into?
Yeah. So I want to, before answering that, I want to kind of dissect it a little bit and say that it's important to know what your preference is. And most of you watching this are going to have a good a good feel for what that is. If you aren't sure, you probably like a little of both. You can take the tool and learn what degree you have that preference. But I think it's also really important, in addition to understanding myself, is to understand that these differences exist on any community or team or even inside of your family where conversations are taking place. Right. And then getting back to your questions around that, I think it is kind of how can I contribute differently and how can we allocate for that in a group? So I think from an individual standpoint, if I have a preference to think things through first, if I am more internal in my focus, and we call this that I prefer the tree method, if I have that, what I need to do to participate well with people who don't is, first of all, not judge them.
Yes.
And second of all, understand that in any group meeting, I might be asked to participate. So do your best to find out what's going to get addressed in a meeting and prepare in advance so that when the time comes to discuss some of these ideas, you have that opportunity, right? I'll speak to the team and in a larger group here in a minute, but let's say that you are an individual who prefers that external focus, that what I want to do is talk it out loud while I'm thinking about it. So people who prefer the tree method do that analysis in their head before they talk. People who prefer the forest method talk through those things, and the way that they can interact with people who don't is, first of all, not to judge them, to understand that they need thought time. And second of all is to say, hey, I'm just thinking out loud. And here's the reason for that. When a person who has that forest preference starts talking about something,
Yes.
if they're talking to somebody who has a tree preference, that person will think they're done at the end when they're not. They are still thinking about it, and each conversation changes it. The other thing that you really want to do is challenge yourself to finalize that discussion so that you can create a go-do and then be really specific with people around you what that go-do might be.
No, that's well said. And one of the things people will ask us, it's like, well, if I'm not getting, you touched on this, if I'm not getting what I know, what do I do? Well, we tell people our method, also our preferred style, it is not necessarily an excuse. Mm-hmm. So if I'm not getting something, and someone's, let's say it's an internal processor, we've been asked this question before, we'll say, well, if I didn't get it, what do I do? Well, one thing that internal processors can do is recap the highlights of what they picked up on and what they've had time to think of after that meeting and send it out to the people who were attending, which gives them several things. Number one, gives them more pieces of data, and it can add to the richness of that meeting. Mm-hmm. Secondarily, it will also let people know that you have something to offer, you are engaged, and that you then have them probably come into you and say, how can we get that during the meeting where we can all build off of it during the meeting for those people who are different, who are more big picture and external, not big picture, but more external processors. Mm-hmm. So that part there is something that we can all pick up and very easily do if we find ourselves in that scenario, in that situation. If we are an external processor, one of the times I'll talk to, and I'm a very big external processor, and you are an external processor, it is that sometimes we have to take a breath and give the internal processors time to share also. And we've actually had, even within our own team years ago, we had someone say, I have something to contribute, but the room is going so quick, they needed time.
Yeah, I need some time.
So when someone's not contribute and you want to make sure that you talk, make sure that we have intentionality around making sure that everyone has a voice in the room at that point in time. And if they're not ready, it's okay.
And I want to speak a little bit to the group dynamics. You sort of mentioned it, but when you bring a group of people together, it's highly likely, it's not always going to be the case, but it's highly likely you're going to have people in that group that have both preferences, right?
Absolutely.
And I will say that that just because a person is outgoing doesn't mean that they prefer to talk through things out loud. So there is on this tool a big difference between extroversion and introversion on a tool like, say, the Myers-Briggs, and the tree forest preference. I personally am a more introverted person on the Myers-Briggs. I like my downtime. I like my cave time. And that helps me replenish my energy. But I'm also a forest preference. So my behavioral preference is to talk through the things that I'm thinking about. They get better through that dialogue. But the individual understanding of this is really, it's really important not to attach characteristics to an individual that really might not be there.
Agreed.
So a person who wants to think through things in advance isn't necessarily more introverted. And so you can't always tell by how outgoing an individual is. Really what it comes down to is how willing is a person to talk through something they haven't given much thought to. And people who prefer the forest want that. People who prefer the tree are highly uncomfortable with that. Neither is right or wrong. And in a group, both dynamics are going to be at play. When we do our team building, utilizing this tool to help those team members build stronger connections, we do an activity where we put a topic on the table that is somewhat familiar, because we don't want people who have the tree preference to not be able to contribute at all, but they haven't had a lot of time to think through it. And we give everybody 5 or 8 poker chips, depending on how much time we have. And when an individual speaks, for every sentence they say, they have to play a chip.
Yes.
So what that does is, in a group of 8 or 10 people, it spreads out the contribution. And many of our teams walk away saying, hey, this is a really great strategy. Let's publish good details in advance so everybody can prepare. And let's really balance the input and contributions so that everybody has a chance to do that. Because in a team, that is one of the biggest challenges to collaboration is people who prefer the forest will talk, while people who prefer the tree will listen. Both of us doing that very, very well. And yet what happens is people who prefer the tree will not contribute to those ideas unless there's been a really good agenda that they've had access to and have had time to prepare.
No, and that makes total sense. And we see this play out on a regular basis in reality. And then when we do a group environment, like you were saying, and teaching this, you'll even see some of the forest put a chip in and slide it back.
We were in one where we used pennies, and they were buying them. Forests were buying chips from trees.
Yes. So it is a preference. And you mentioned that you are an introvert on Myers-Briggs.
I like my downtime. I wake up in the morning. I want my coffee, my meditation time, the time with the puppy.
You're great in front of clients with them all day long. But at the end of the day, to your point, when you get home, you're ready to go.
Want to listen to a book or read a book for a little while. Yes.
And the difference there is myself being the very strong forest and the extrovert at the, go through the whole day interaction, and, it's good interaction that makes me feel good and energy. And I go home and it's like, what's next?
Yeah.
Who else do I get to engage with?
Yeah.
And that's the unique difference of people who have different styles. In this case, where the Myers-Briggs component of this comes in and comparing it to the differences of them.
Yeah. So Myers-Briggs is a personality tool.
Correct. Yes.
And the interface methods tool is based on behavioral science. And we chose to do it that way because we wanted to highlight things that really do impact team dynamics, but that are very adaptable. So if I determine that you are processing different from me, I can do adaptations behaviorally to help our interactions be smoother. Whereas on a personality tool, we are kind of who we are, and we can proudly wear that badge and people will understand that, but it's not really built on dimensions that a person can change. And that's the big difference between a personality tool and a behavioral tool.
Because one is requiring change, and the other is adapting.
Right.
With
Absolutely.
That.
Absolutely.
And give people an understanding of this too. It is, we're talking about some things that we've seen kind of vaguely, but real life situations it plays out. And there can be really, when it's done well, really strong communication, really strong collaboration for better outcomes. But when it can go wrong, sometimes you have to pay attention to that. Years ago, we were working, you'll remember this, we had a client, and that client had worked and had been part of this, utilizing this tool for a while, and they were very comfortable with it. And we were having I think we were having a meeting one day, and we got a call from one of the presidents of that company. And that president said, well, I'd like to talk to you, come to my office when you get a chance. So we set a meeting, went and sat down and talked. And what was shared was that the president had taken someone who was in a vice president's role and had decided they were doing a great job. There was an opening, interviewed other people, and then this candidate got the job. And so this candidate got promoted to the SVP role, which was now reporting directly to the president, whereas it wasn't reporting to a different person prior, of course, to an SVP. And now the reason we got the call is that the president said, something's happened, something's wrong. And I think the comment was, I think I may have done something to hurt this person's career. So that's very serious within an organization at that level. And so what happened from there was the conversation we had was in asking questions about what's changed. And then one of the biggest changes we were told is that the person was always very reliable, understood the business. And now, since the change, this person was going in and trying to enact on things that hadn't been settled. They hadn't been finalized. They were in the early stages of discussion. And when we went and talked to the person who had been promoted, I'm going to ask you to kind of fill in some blanks there, if you would.
So the individual who had been promoted had a preference for the tree method and wanted to think through things before speaking and wasn't participating as much in ideation sessions as the person in the president's role wanted them to be. So that was one challenge, and the person in the president's role articulated that. But another challenge was that because a person with a tree preference is done when they speak, they assume you have done that due diligence as well, and that you also are done when you speak. And so we are ready to move ahead. That was not the case. The president was still articulating and ideating and trying to get the other individual to participate, and they weren't done. And essentially, what that person told us was, they will say to do something and then come back and say they didn't say that. And that was our first clue. Like, this is a simple difference in how you want to process. So we gave the person who had just been promoted some tips around preparation and asking, are we ready to move ahead? Which actually is good for the situation to ask that question because it helps bring closure to the ideation. And then we gave tips to the president that said, make sure you're saying, I'm just talking out loud. And make sure that you are giving that individual enough preparation time to participate. So these were big things that were very easy to solve once we realized what was going on, and yet could have been a career derailer, but most certainly would have impacted the team that they were able to become. And they worked together for many years and created so many amazing things.
Well, not only that, it wasn't too long ago that we happened to be in a meeting and the president said, not prompted by us, but in talking to the group, by the way, I'm just talking out loud right now. We're not done. And so again, it sticks.
It's a habit that they adapted and it works out really well.
And again, the tools here within interface methods, because it is behavioral, it is first off a choice because it's easy to learn. So once I learn it about myself, then there are techniques that we can utilize to identify that even if the other person hasn't taken interface methods. You can start to ask certain questions. We actually have customers who utilize this on their KPIs, and they'll do it with prospects, they'll do it with customers, with their vendor partners, and they will ask certain questions to know, oh, this person is more of an external processor. They're ready to go. This person asked for some downtime, or they're quiet if they're not quite ready. So they start to put on their KPIs, I think this person is a certain area. So in the 3 areas that you mentioned earlier, that is something where they can now with good confidence feel, okay, I can identify their 3 key core areas of their behavioral styles and preferences in these methods, and then I can tailor my dialogue with them. If I do that, I have a better opportunity to keep them in the dialogue, better opportunity to connect. And if I can do that, then of course I can influence better and ultimately achieve the goals that we're looking for. And we do hear from the feedback from our customers, as we know, that it makes a difference in the overall productivity of the organization and the relationships that they develop across the board.
And our customers tell us that people understand it so well that it's so easy to adapt, and they start really respecting these differences and then taking steps to ensure that the collaboration can be equal across all people. And that builds a sense of welcoming and belonging in an organization as well.
Yeah, and we will be doing, as you mentioned earlier, in the future here, we will be doing the third area that we'll talk about, which is focusing on influence.
We will. Yeah. And I want to talk a little bit about the use of the interface methods tool in sales and services, particularly this tree forest factor. So I'm going to give a couple of examples before we wrap up. Let's say Ken is a preferred tree and I am a preferred forest. And let's say that I am the customer or prospect. If Ken is going to service my concerns, provide a good customer experience for me, provide good customer service for me, listen to the things that I'm concerned about, I, as an external processor, am going to want him to engage in that discussion right in the here and now. So if your customer service and you're a tree and your customer is a forest, there's a few things that you can do to participate in that. One is, and mostly ideal, extract what you can in advance of the discussion, if at all possible, from the customer, so that you can prepare before having that. If you are working customer service on a desk that is taking a lot of calls back to back, maybe create the top 10 scenarios that you're dealing with so that you can talk through those scenarios on the fly with a customer who is more external. And a third option is for you to say, I am going to need to research that. If you'll give me a few minutes, I can get back to you, or if you'll give me a few days, but make sure that you whatever commitment you make to them, you get back to them in that time, right? I think the same is if Ken is a salesperson as a tree, I am a forest prospect. Ken, can you speak a little bit to how that the tree can prepare to do well in a sales environment? Yes,
and actually, I'm going to go back to reality here.
Yeah.
Again, a real case scenario with a customer of ours. And the client, in a large meeting of leaders, there was a question that came up about, well, maybe we should have more people who are external processors as sales leaders, our sales executives. And then someone spoke up and said, well, why is that? Well, because they can connect. Well, we asked them to do a little research, and come to find out, they were about 50-50 of their top 10 best overall salespeople, sales executives. They had both external processors and internal processors. And in fact, number one in the organization was a very strong internal processor who needed time to think. And we had the opportunity to get to know him, actually out in this field environment, meeting with their team. What he did was he prepared, as you said, in advance for scenarios. And he said that it wasn't just for that customer. He prepared based upon what things customers might bring up who were not within that company, but had similar kinds of needs. So it helped them be ultra prepared.
Right.
And then because of that, he was very at ease and very fluid, having dialogues, change of directions that weren't anticipated because of that. He was also very detail-oriented because of that, his work he put in. So he could get as granular if that person was also an internal processor. But to what we talked about last time, when one of the first area that we look at is, how do I need to look at data. Am I going to be output big picture?
Yeah.
Or I need the details? He's able to give them that granular detail, or he was able to stay up high.
Yeah.
So the tool really does enlighten people and help them feel more comfortable. That was one of the things he said is it helped him to feel more prepared, more comfortable. And that's why he had very strong results. And he's still there again today with very
still
strong
top
results.
performer.
Yeah.
And one of the things that he did was that was one of the options I put on the table was he had thought through the most common scenarios. And so he was very able to talk on the fly about those things.
Yeah.
But let's say the tables are turned and I am the forest and Ken is the tree. But I am selling to him or I am providing customer service to him.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm providing customer service to him, one of the things I'm going to notice is he will be very thoughtful in how he puts the information out there to me. I'll ask questions. He may pause before he answers. That should be a little indicator for us that you're probably working with someone who needs a little bit of time to think before they talk.
Yes.
Two things are true about that. If you immediately start creating possible solutions, either in a sales interaction or a customer service interaction, they will need some time to consider it. So allow that. Don't expect them to jump in and give you feedback immediately. And this is going to be hard. So generally speaking, when I'm a forest selling to a person who's a tree, it probably is a two-part interaction. I'm going to gather information and suggest solutions. They're going to need to consider it and think about it, and we'll follow up on a dialogue that is, later in the time. When we're providing customer service, if I am quickly talking through the solutions, how's that sound? They really haven't had the time to consider it. So use your ears to find the clues that say maybe they need it, and then offer that to them, right? And again, the more preparation you can give them in advance, the better that discussion's going to go. So in a sales situation, if I know that I'm working with somebody who is a tree preference, I might send them something just before the meeting to say, hey, we're going to be thinking about these things, or maybe a day prior so that there is better dialogue. And we do that in our training and facilitation too.
We absolutely do. And again, I think
sneak peeks.
Yeah, that's very, very true. No, so I encourage anyone who is watching today to try this out. Try it out in a safe environment. Mm-hmm. And so if you like, go to our website to learn more at interfacemethods.com and just peruse through there. You'll get some information that'll give you some insights. Again, we do have a portal there. You can sign up for it. And we have a student version of that. Yeah. That is a very low cost for those students who think about, I'm in college or I'm getting ready to go to college, and it helps them to understand how to connect better. We've actually done this with some colleges with their resident directors and resident assistants. So that's something where they can do that. We also have services within that, and some of the tools we have in there, we have video vignettes where you can go in and look in a retail environment. We have vignettes, but we also have some if you are looking at it from a perspective of an office environment. Mm-hmm. So you can connect in that way.
The dashboard's pretty powerful. So if this is something you want to learn more about, it's pretty easy to get in. Also reach out to us. We can have a conversation with you. Yeah.
Yes. So again, thank you for your time today, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon.
Yeah, we'll look forward to it. Have a great day. The 4 Bars podcast has been brought to you by Edges Inc., a growth advisory firm based in Bentonville, Arkansas. I founded the company in 2001.
Edges promotes growth of people, companies, and ideas. Our team collaboration tool, called Interface Methods, is a basis for teams to work together more collaboratively, understand each other, and accept differences and address challenges together.
We also started a nonprofit called Unform Your Bias. We teach kids and their adult influencers how to utilize storytelling as a means to reduce bias in the world. We hope you'll check us out, subscribe to our podcast, and look at our websites.